Tom Curran's Patriots Talk podcast is presented by FanDuel Sportsbook. Make every moment more.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome into Tom Curran's Patriots Talk podcast. We will have Phil Perry with us, as usual. But we're also going to bring in Rick Spielman, former Vikings GM, former Dolphins GM. He's going to help us diagnose the problems from an executive level as to what the Patriots are dealing with. We'll talk about the trade deadline. How should the Patriots approach that? The draft next year, the Mac Jones situation, what he thinks of the quarterback situation the Patriots have got themselves pinched into. All that, and Phil and I will bat around the notion of Malik Cunningham as a conceivable backup or replacement for Mac. Is that even feasible? We'll get to it right now on Tom Curran's Patriots Talk podcast. All right, ladies and gentlemen, bring in Rick Spielman now. He worked for the Lions. He worked for the Bears, the Dolphins, and the Minnesota Vikings. 16 years with the Vikings. He has been a team architect, and he's made some of the most difficult decisions at the most important positions over his time. Thanks for coming on, my friend.
Thanks for having me.
Get right into it. The trade deadline approaches. Patriots are kind of staring at 1-7. They got a lot of key guys who have expiring contracts. They have quarterback questions. Their offensive line is in disrepair, and there is uncertainty with Bill Belichick.
Anything positive? God, I mean, can you keep going down? Can we get some positivity in this conversation?
The weather has been awesome out here.
There you go.
What would your approach, Rick, be at the trade deadline for a team in this kind of a situation?
Well, I believe they have Buffalo and Miami coming up.
Yes.
And before the trade deadline. So if they would happen to win those two games, which right now it looks like they're not going to have much of a chance unless something drastically changes, especially on the offensive side of the ball, then maybe you say, well, do we potentially go out and add a player or two? Because you still may be in the race, although it's a very tough division.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very tough AFC conference to say that if you're at the record you're at right now, what is a legitimate chance of getting into the playoffs? And if not, and if you want to start to collect draft picks and things that you're going to have to do to improve this roster next year, if you're packing it in, let's say right now, then try to move what assets you can. But if you look at the roster, and you think you're going to get a first-round pick for somebody or even a second-round pick for somebody, I don't know who you would put up there that you can think you can get that kind of value. I mean, Kendrick Bourne, is he worth a second-round pick? I don't think anyone sees him in the league other than a third or fourth type receiver, you know. So you go over to the defensive side of the ball. The guys that are coming out of contract, is it Uche and Duggar?
And Duggar, but again, you'd only be getting 1 year, and then you'd have to re-up them at $10 million a year at least.
Yeah. So is it? You have to decide: are those guys that you want to continue to build your roster around? Are they the core pieces for you to get this turned around? I remember going through these conversations plenty of times, and if we identified a core player, that was a guy that we knew we were going to try to extend even before the season. And we did probably 10 or 15 extensions if they were going to be part of our program or part of our organization going forward. If not, and you're having a down year, then trade them and get some value, because I don't know what they'll get on the open market. You can anticipate what you would get from a compensatory pick, but is that a third rounder, fourth rounder? Who knows what that market would bear wherever they would sign.
Yeah, what's interesting about the comp picks situation, Rick, is that they have so much cap space for this coming off season that they may not get many comp picks for the guys who could walk out the door this offseason if they end up bringing free agents of similar value into their program. So that's a really interesting thing. I think as the deadline approaches here, do we want to get something for these guys now? Because we might not get the comp picks for them in a couple of years. As a team builder, Rick, and we're talking about a team obviously that's 1-5, do you have to be cognizant of culture or morale or anything along those lines? Or do you have to make, let's call what it is, cold, calculated decisions for the betterment of the future of the team if you do the things that we're talking about now? trading guys like Kyle Duggar, Josh Uche, maybe some of the best players on your roster in what might be a lost season. Does that part of it factor in for a general manager?
Oh yeah, it does. And it's like, I would never guess it would be talking about culture up with the New England Patriots for what they've established over the years and the success they've had over the years. But if those guys, and we'd had meetings not only on the player, what he does on the field for us, but is this the type of player that we want to move forward with? And if not, and there have been players that have been very good players for us, but we made the decision not to have them as part of our discussions on extensions going forward for maybe not what they're doing on the field, but from what you indicated, a culture fit. And do we want to build our roster with this? So they have to have all those internal discussions, and they have to decide if it's these guys that we're talking about that we want to extend, are they not only going to help us win games, but are they going to be the culture fit of the New England Patriots? But those guys have been around, so they should have a pretty easy answer on whether they are or they aren't.
The sticky situation here is Bill is the head coach and he's the general manager. He's also built the team that, as we look at it, doesn't have a lot of talent, certainly on the offensive side of the ball, to understate the case. You're going to have an owner who's going to, they don't have a triangle of authority like you guys did when you worked with Brad, for instance, and the Wilfs. So it's Bill will talk to Robert, and Robert will say, well, the roster isn't good. And there might be a hard decision that has to be made as to how much responsibility Bill will have to continue building since the bottom has fallen out. How difficult is it as a team builder, whether you're Bill Belichick or Rick Spielman, to know that the owner is sitting there going, okay, this isn't the way it was supposed to look at all?
Yeah, no, you have a lot of questions to answer. And I would always put together I would call it my book for the year on everything we did in the football operations, whether it was personnel, whether it was trades we made, whether it was this or that, and then have an explanation on why it did or didn't work. And if it didn't work, let's go back and evaluate why it didn't work. And so we hopefully are not making the same mistake over and over again or repeating the same mistake. But we did that from the training room, from how we traveled, from all the way down to who our priests and our pastor were for religious services. So our sports science, everything from A to Z. And especially when you have a down year, you have to have enough, I guess I would say, humility that if you're not doing something right and you know it needs to change, then have the openness to how do I change or what do we have to change so we have success. I have a system in place, but if it's not working, then how do we do, or what do we have to do to make it better?
Rick, how do you feel about Mac Jones? If you were in Bill Belichick's position as general manager and you're looking at him, he's just finishing up or he's in the middle of his third year now on his rookie contract. You know the situation around him isn't great, but you've also seen things from him as an individual that you don't love either. How would you move forward at that position if you're the Patriots?
Well, they know I don't know anything and how he is internally in the building. I'm sure I know coming out of Alabama that he put a lot of time and energy into getting prepared for games. I don't know what type of leader he is up there or what if the players have the respect for him. You know, there were signs that he was going to be a very good quarterback his rookie year. And then it was last year. And did that give him a chance when Matt Patricia and Joe Judge were whoever was calling the plays on the outside of the ball? And then this year they bring in Bill O'Brien, who I think is a very good offensive coordinator. But do they have the weapons necessarily around him? I mean, if you look at the roster, especially at the skill positions, who technically is their number one receiver? I mean, you got Thornton Wright, that is just a speed guy. Douglas is a rookie. They have, but would you consider him a true number one receiver?
Yeah. I mean, Devontae Parker would be their one, but I think on most teams, he'd be closer to a 3.
Yeah. And he dropped a big catch at the end of the the Las Vegas Raiders game that probably cost them the game. But I did see they have some issues up the offensive line. I understand with all the injuries they're dealing with. I thought going into the season that one thing they didn't address was the offensive tackle position. I mean, I know they signed Riley Weef, who we had in Minnesota, but he's at the end of his career and he's been banged up, I believe. Trent Brown may be their most consistent offensive lineman, if you want to say that, playing on the left side. But they drafted all rookies that could become very good football players, but they're all inside players. I didn't see, and maybe I misjudged it, any of those guys being able to play the tackle position.
Yeah, it's been a jailbreak. And that's the thing is when we talk about Mac Jones, when we look at the numbers, I think it's 0 touchdowns and 5 picks, Phil, over the last few weeks. And you look at the panic throws and the meltdowns, but you're saying, but it's a jailbreak. If you're going to have a stationary quarterback, and we've always used Kirk Cousins, Rick, as kind of, if he can become a really talented player, he looks like a Kirk Cousins ceiling.
Right.
What did you try to do around Kirk to build your team? When you looked, did you want to have the offensive line in place and then say, all right, let's go get this really smart guy who's accurate and works hard? Or did you say, let's get Kirk and then work around it?
Well, we tried to build the offensive line, but we wanted to get the playmakers. So we had Stephon Diggs, and then we ended up trading Diggs, and we got fortunate to get a Justin Jefferson. We had Kyle Rudolph at the time at the tight end position. We always had really good running backs. Dalvin Cook was there when Kirk came in. So we had some explosive offensive playmakers around it. And the one thing when you watch Kirk, and he's similar to Mac Jones, they're pocket passers. They're not going to create with their legs. They're not going to threaten anyone about scrambling. But when they're in the pocket and they have some time, they are very accurate as throwers. And Mac Jones, when he came out of Alabama, look at the receivers that he was throwing to. And he had time. And look how accurate of a passer he was. But when those guys don't have time, they're not going to be able to buy a second chance. They're not going to scramble or make some type of off-schedule play. The other thing that we were concerned about with a immobile quarterback was that up there on the offensive line, again, you have to protect the edges, but since those guys can't move and Cousins likes to step up in the pocket, that your two guards and your center better be pretty stout in order to give him the ability to step up in the pocket because he's not going to scramble. So that gives him some room in there to operate within that pocket. And a couple of the guys that we drafted, struggled, I would say, with anchoring versus power and collapsing the pocket. But I don't know if there's anyone tougher in the NFL than some of the hits that Kirk Cousins takes and how he delivers when he gets he gets whacked around now pretty good. And the durability that he has shown through the years of, I think the only time I was there, he only missed a game is when we sat him. We already had the playoffs clinched against the Chicago Bears. So, but every week, regardless, he gets up there. And when he does have times, you see the gaudy type numbers that he can put up. So, and I think Mac Jones has that ability, but it wasn't very stable. The offensive coordinator position, new offensive coordinator coming in. They don't have a lot of playmakers around him, and they're having issues on the offensive line, and they don't run the ball effectively right now either. To take
most people,
Mac Jones.
And most people want Mac Jones gone, as the climate gets in different places. Most people want Mac Jones gone. My feeling is, as somebody who observes the team and has followed the team and been a fan of the team from way back, was you can't quit on him. He's still on his friggin' rookie contract. He's a first-round pick. You saw how he was with protection. You still don't know what you have, and it's year 4. And that's why it's hard to say, well, let Bill run it back, because he's kind of run the train into the bridge with Mac over the last couple of years. They're betwixt and between with head coach and quarterback.
And that's everybody's making a comparison. Well, look what Tom Brady did for us. Mac Jones, is not doing the same thing Tom Brady for us. And if we had some holes, Tom Brady was able to cover up those holes by the type of quarterback he was. But I think the expectations may be so high up there that no, I don't know if there's anyone going to come through again that plays the way Tom Brady played with in the pocket and how he got rid of the ball and everything he did. But he may be one of the best quarterbacks, if not the best quarterback that ever played in the history of the game. You're not going to find another quarterback like that, I don't think, unless you get real lucky, like they did when
they did in the first place.
Right. And now maybe their luck will improve at that position, Rick, if they are picking near the top of the draft. And at the risk of just looking way too far ahead here.
That's not too far ahead. I've been talking about the draft for the past 2 months.
So I love good. I love that means he's coming back in a couple weeks.
My kind of guy. But I want you to help us settle a debate that Tom and I have had, because Tom, as he just said, he's looking at Mac Jones and saying, well, we still don't really know what this guy is. So if there's a great left tackle at the top of the draft, and say the Patriots are picking 5th overall or somewhere in that range, just go get the left tackle and then try to maximize what you do have in Mac Jones. Whereas I might look at it and say, you can't be sure you're going to be picking at the top of the draft that high. Again, it looks like it's a pretty strong quarterback class. You would know better than me, Rick, if you've been looking at it. Would you roll the dice and just start fresh at that quarterback position, or would you try to build around the guy that you have now?
Well, you would have to understand how you internally feel about Mac Jones. And if you're saying that if we do get the people around him, whether it's a number 1 receiver, whether it's we're able to run the ball, whether we improve the offensive line, do we see Mac Jones that we saw the flashes of as a rookie, or is he just not good enough? And then the other thing you have to talk about is if Caleb Williams, who's probably, is going to go number 1, and you're in striking range and you like a Drake May out of North Carolina, who's a number 2 quarterback, and you think he is a unique talent that you'll never get an opportunity to get, then you have to make that decision to go get that quarterback, because you may never get another opportunity at it again. After those 2, then there is about 7 or 8 guys that are right now clunked together on who's going to be the number 3 quarterback off the board. And then how do they compare to Mac Jones? Now, in my opinion, I think Caleb Williams would be a no-brainer. From what I've seen so far and just watching tape, Drake May would be a no-brainer. But after that, then it's like, okay, do you want to go with Mac Jones? And, what if Marvin Harrison, you had an opportunity to get a Marvin Harrison Jr.? And look at the NFL today. Look at what a difference a number 1 receiver makes for a quarterback. You saw Tyreek Hill and what he did for Tua. You saw Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown, the difference A.J. Brown made. So it seems like, even we were fortunate to have Diggs, but then we got a Justin Jefferson. How good did that make Kirk Cousins that much better? Because you got a receiver that's going to go up and get the ball and win games for you. So those are the things that you have to really discuss internally. And excuse me, if I can't get a Drake May, if I feel that strongly about him, or Caleb Williams, then what are my options so I can get a difference maker, especially on the offensive side of the ball?
The weird sticky situation, and this is my last observation, we'll cut you loose, is Robert Kraft has stated publicly that he is a big Mac Jones believer, big Mac Jones guy. And he ascribed the problems Mac had last year to the situation around Mac, which I think we all did to a large extent. And I think that in Robert's heart of hearts, if we hit him with the truth serum, he'd say, that's still a good player. Bill, you kind of screwed him up. And now you want to move away from him when he's 3 years in the league and start over? From the outside, as a GM, as somebody who's done the job, does that get combustible no matter how much success 2 individuals have had together? Do you look at that and go, oh, that could be a problem?
Well, you're always going to have to lean with the man that's signing your paycheck. He's the boss. But I know anytime I had to deal with ownership, and especially with the Wilf family in Minnesota, we had very, I guess, adult conversations on players. And, you just have to be upfront and honest. I don't think he can play, or I do think he can play, and these are the reasons why. But ultimately, Mr. Kraft is the decision maker for the organizations. He's the owner. So you lay out your case on this and this, and either he's going to understand you or he's not, and just say, we're going to stick with Mac Jones. You figure it out. So, but ultimately, the owner makes the final decision.
Well, I would love to be a fly on the wall for some of those adult conversations when you
No doubt. Oh my God, no doubt. And you know what? All you fly
guys
on the
have
wall.
adult conversations, do you? And you're with you guys.
No, young adult, maybe young adult.
Young adult. All right. Everybody got to be a fly on the wall for our friend Rick Spielman. We truly appreciate you coming on and making us smarter and giving us some insight into what we're seeing here, which is something we are completely unfamiliar with.
Thanks, Rick.
Relax. They'll work it out.
Okay. Take care. Snap into action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/NSBO and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. 21 plus and present in Mass. Hope is here. First online real money wager only. $10 first deposit required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling helpline ma.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support. Play it smart from the start. GameSenseMA.com or call 1-800-GAM-1234. All right, outstanding insight from Rick Spielman on the macro. Let's get down to the micro now. And Malik Cunningham, many are clamoring for Malik Cunningham. And I want to roll this back. Our guy Adam Hart, who works with us, brought up the quote from 2014 when the Patriots drafted Jimmy Garoppolo. And I'm just going to read this quote from Bill, talking about the reasoning behind drafting Jimmy Garoppolo at that point. Quote, in our organization, I don't think we would put together a team the way Indianapolis did when they lost Manning and they go 0-16, 1-15, or whatever it was. I don't really think that's what we're looking for. Unfortunately, when we lost Tom Brady in 2008, we had a player that could step in. We won 11 games. We want to be competitive, even if something happens to a player at any position. I think depth is always important. You never know when you're going to need it, but I don't think we'd be happy going 1-15 if we had an injury at one position. Other people have different philosophies. I'm just saying that the contrast to that example is here. I don't think that's what we're really trying to do. Which, Phil, brings us to Malik Cunningham and Bailey Zappi and Mac Jones and Ian Book and Trace McSorley and Matt Corral and Jarrett Stidham and Cam Newton and Danny Etling, for lack of a better example. Now Malik Cunningham, many folks are wondering if he might get an opportunity to play. And he would have played last week, as Phil pointed out, because he was the backup and Bailey Zappi was the emergency quarterback. Had Mac Jones been injured early in the game, that meant Malik Cunningham until the third quarter, period. End of story. Unless Malik got hurt, then you could bring in Blake.
And Tom, let me point out, I'm going to pull you out of the time machine now and just point out that the new emergency quarterback rule, the third emergency quarterback rule, is different than the old emergency quarterback rule, which the league used to have, which used to allow the emergency guy to come in for the fourth quarter. That's no longer the case. So the only way Bailey Zappi would have been able to play the other day is if both Mac Jones and Malik Cunningham had been ruled out either due to injury or ejection.
So you needed Malik to start throwing haymakers if you want a Bailey in there?
Or pull a hammy. Or pull a hamstring. Yeah.
All right. So he's not, look, maybe I'm wrong, but Malik Cunningham didn't even really play in the preseason until a little bit later on. We didn't even see him on the field until the Packers week of practice, necessarily playing a bunch of quarterback. He got minor snaps. We didn't really have a training camp. He's an undrafted player that the Patriots released at cutdown time, and nobody in the league wanted him or could make room for him, I should say it that way. And the Patriots brought him back. So he has a role with the team, but it's a developmental role. And the Patriots were proposing last week to say he can play the rest of this game if Matt gets hurt. And I look at that quote from Bill and I say, you are organizationally in a place maybe worse than where the Colts were. It's your heartbeat away because you don't have a quarterback who can play. You don't have, who was the kid? Curtis Painter?
Exactly.
And I think the Malik's out there because they can't block, not because he gives them the best chance to win. He's out there because it kind of minimizes the disaster plays that Matt gets into when the poop hits the fan. And the poop will continue hitting the fan because, you know, unless you have a 6'4", 315-pound guy wandering around who's not playing for an NFL team, you're kind of screwed. The Patriots are back to Connor McDermott, perhaps. They cycled through Riley Reif, Calvin Anderson, Vidarian Lowe, Tyrone Wheatley's injured. They have rookies, and you can blame Bill O'Brien if you want, but it's not him. You can't call a game for a stationary quarterback with a subpar arm if he's not blocked for. So the Malik Cunningham proposal, Phil, is malpractice, to use the word again.
Completely unprepared, and it's just so drastic. It's just so obvious when you hear that quote from Bill Belichick back in the spring of 2014 after drafting Garoppolo. I think you're right, Tom. I think the reason he was the number 2 the other day is not so that they could run the Patriots offense if Mac Jones got injured. It was so that they could just get a bunch of athletes on the field and run around and try to make something happen and play playground football and see how it goes. And in a game where you're trying to ostensibly salvage your season, save 2023, you have to beat the Raiders in order to keep your playoff percent chances at, I don't know, something approaching 5 or 6% maybe. And you went into the game with essentially one quarterback. It's just, it's indefensible. And Tom, I think the fix would have been, as soon as you realized Bailey Zappi was having a bad summer, and he might have been so bad as you're doing your evaluations through training camp, and I know you're in the grind of it and you're focused on the practice schedule and injuries and how guys are coping and all that, you had to have at some point said to yourself, man, is he having a rough camp? And man, we can't be one heartbeat away from playing this guy. And get aggressive and make a trade. Go get a Case Keenum, who's the 3rd quarterback in Houston right now, or somebody of the like, and try to make it so that you're not in the position you're in right now, which again is, I think, indefensible.
It's astounding to me to realize that nothing else will work unless you have the quarterback. And again, Malik Cunningham could turn into a decent NFL player. He could turn into, you know, a good thrower of the football. But right now, every team is going to see him wander onto the field and say, until he throws it, we're going to presume he can't throw it. And we are going to rack his 190-pound body with all our 300-pounders and see who they bring in next, because they don't have Jacoby Myers anymore either. It's insane that, and these are the small decisions that Robert Kraft might be filing away and say, what was the plan there? We just heard Rick Spielman talking about you had to have, for every decision made by football operations, explain what the thinking was. What's the thinking of going into a game with a guy who's never thrown an NFL pass and was undrafted out of Louisville, being a heartbeat away from playing in the game? How do you explain that? And you tried to get Bill to explain it this week, but it defies explanation.
It does. And I will say this. I mean, how do you make the best of a bad situation now, Tom? Because there's no point going and trading for a real backup now. There's no point in investing, you know, whether it's money or trade capital in a player like that at this point, because the season is lost. To me, I would, if I'm Robert Kraft, I would want them, whether it's Malik Cunningham, as bleak as his prospects as an NFL quarterback or NFL player period are, or whether it's Will Grier, who had to be plucked off a practice squad, who was nobody's idea of a starting NFL quarterback. Pick one guy and make him the backup and give him the practice reps and just see what you have. Again, it's a lost season. The season should be all about assessing the talent on the roster, assessing the leaders on the roster, who you'd like to move forward with potentially, but don't go through the rest of the season and toggle back and forth between Zappi or Cunningham, or maybe Will Grier gets the backup reps this week. Pick a guy, give him whatever limited reps you can give him in practice, because they are limited. Bill Belichick pointed out to me earlier this week, and see what you have. It's probably not going to be great. But this whole idea of having 4 guys in the room and 3 of them can't play in the league, you got to pick one and see what you can wring out of them.
It goes back to a conversation we've had a million times in the last 5 years, and that we've had recently too. Urgency, a lack of urgency, a let's see how it plays out mentality that is employed so frequently with what end up being kind of harebrained ideas. Let's change the offense and put two guys who don't coach offense in charge of it. Kind of a harebrained, we all know if you're listening to the pod or watching it right now, you all have them down right now, so we don't have to revisit all of them. Phil, we're going to talk to you in pregame live on Sunday from the field. We will get more into obviously the Bills matchup right now, but there's been a lot more compelling stuff, I think, this week and fascinating stuff to dive into than this Bills game. But just real quick, Mac Jones talked about how difficult an defensive line and front seven the Bills have to deal with. Trent Brown was out early this week. We'll see what his availability is. Hunter Henry also out. It's a tough spot, bud.
David Andrews missing time in practice as well this week. So, boy, I don't know what you do. If you're Mac Jones, if you're Bill O'Brien, I would imagine, Tom, it's something pretty similar to what they did in Vegas, which is throw it short, throw it sideways. He had the fastest release time in all of football in week 6 through 3 quarters. His average throw traveled only 2.4 yards down the field. 2.4? I mean, that's the kind of thing you're going to have to do to try to survive against what is a very good Buffalo front.
All right. We will circle up with you guys on Sunday night after the game. Hopefully we have a little bit more optimism to share with you, but thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Peace.